ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ትችላላችሁ።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ ጥያቄና መልስ የክፍል ስራዎች ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁት አይነት በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ ከናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
Chapter 5, data types and then data collection methods. This chapter actually primarily will address the following 3 main issues. The first part is just briefly introducing the data and the data types. Subsequently, I will actually briefly explain methods of data collection, primarily the survey administration, and then participatory rural appraisal techniques. And then I will also give you just introducing the brief quotation from a book, Kotari, and then it says what a good diet does for a body and mind, so does a healthy data set for analysis and model building. That means if you actually properly collect the data with due consideration, and then the remaining part, particularly while undertaking data analysis, and then while using this data for different method of analysis, including a model, you will not get much trouble. That was the point. Therefore, primarily, while you collect data, you also need to consider and then give much consideration. That was the point. And then briefly in this part, I will also give you some descriptions overall, the issue related to the data. What are data? This is because data is a plural form of data. And therefore, this data is actually it is a plural form of data. And then what are data? What are the different types of data? Actually, I will briefly elaborate, explain the different types of data. Then subsequently, we'll actually discuss the methods of data collections. In general, this data refers available raw informations might be actually collected through primary or secondary source. It might also collected through different mechanisms like through undertaking interview or through questionnaire, or you might also collect data from secondary sources. Secondary data source will also be might also be used. And then whatever the case, by organizing the data in some specific fashions, and then you will actually going to analyze the result. Primarily, you will answer the specific questions related to your specific objectives through actually analyzing the data. That was the point. You also need to answer the basic research questions through analyzing this data. That was the point. Therefore, in general, the data could be classified into 3 parts. The first part is cross-sectional data, or it's also referred as spot data. Cross-sectional data or spot data is also another. And second type is time series data. It's also referred as longitudinal research, longitudinal data. And third, panel or hybrid of both cross-sectional and time series data. This cross-sectional data is a data that will be collected at a single point in time. You will simply collect, for instance, in order to carry out a research on factors influencing maybe customer satisfaction on maybe service of companies. You actually need to collect actual data. And these data, which will be actually collected from customers at one specific point in time, at one specific period, during that specific period might be referred as cross-sectional data or spot data. You will simply collect data and then you will analyze and then you will answer the research questions. A second type of data is time series data. This time series data is a data for the same observations across period of time. Like for instance, you want to analyze sales performance of company Z. And the sales performance might be actually analyzing through collecting data across period of time. What happened to the company sale over the last 10 years consecutive years on the same data. And then same type of data is referred as time series data. That is a data for the same observation across successive period of time. Over the last 10 years, what happened to company sale? And then you might actually collect this type of data. The third type of data, a combination of both hybrid and then time series data. And this type of data is actually the case in which, for instance, in order to analyze the company's performance, you might simply take average data over maybe the last three consecutive years. In such case, whenever there is time break between successive data, the data is actually, it looks time series, but it has some time intervals. Like a good example for this one is, you might simply take, let's say, for instance, a quarter data for in 1 year. And then if you actually take quarter data within a given year, and then in each three months, you will also have a data. And then this panel is somewhat, it will simply consider a combination of both cross-sectional time series data. And then if it is not clear, I will actually elaborate later. The third point in this chapter is methods of data collection. Primarily, we do have different methods. I will actually briefly explain the methods of data collections briefly in this part. What are the kind of maybe data collection instruments? How the researchers are going to use in the study. These are the points that we're going to briefly discuss in this part. Basically, the first part is different types of data collections. Basically, to collect data in different fields, we do have different techniques. And then the first one is techniques for collecting, but primarily, the primary data is face-to-face interview. And then second one is through questionnaire. You will simply prepare the questionnaire and then you will actually feed by yourself, or you will simply send the questionnaire to the respondent, either by mail or by email, so that they actually filled on behalf of you. That one is second type of method of data collection. And then interview on the telephone, particularly kind of this period. You might also use this particularly if you have detailed information about the respondent, like telephone and email. And the same questionnaire might also be simply filled through telephone. That's also one part. The other main specifically methods of data collections to be this electronically distributed questionnaire. It should also be the case. In some of the cases, you will simply prepare the questionnaire and then you will simply send by mail. And then this is also referred as online interview. It might be the case. But mostly, this try to also Google this monkey online survey. There is free online software, and by which you will going to maybe develop your questionnaire, and then so that you will simply send the link to the respondent. The respondent immediately, they will actually, as soon as they just filled, you will have a summary of the report on the online. And then this might also be just applied But the problem in most East African countries, including maybe most developing countries, is just access to the internet, and then the facilities might be the case, but this monkey online survey is mostly quite applied by most researchers in most developed countries. But in the case of this COVID-19, where you are just limited to move from place to place to collect data, and then you might also limited to meet people in person, and then the best way is just simply download the online survey. And this survey will also be just simply prepared on the system, and then you will simply send the link to the individuals as soon as they actually just fill the answer, and then you would have a report. Try to just read about the monkey online survey. That is a kind of reading assignment. Primarily, it might serve much, particularly for collecting data for this kind of period. And then the other case is case study. The case study is also another. Primarily, the case study is also the case. The studies is also quite important to particularly collect data. And these case studies might be the case in which you might collect primarily specific informations by undertaking certain specific instrument, like for instance, by using telephone or internet. You might also make direct specific discussions on key issues, and it's also referred to this key informant interview. You will simply select the main respondent, and then you will ask certain specific informations on telephone or internet, and that is also might also be used like to complement your main survey. And that is also referred as face-to-face interview. And this face-to-face interview is mostly just changed to structured question, where you will actually prepare the questionnaire, and then you will actually ask the respondent. This is because most respondent, they might not actually read or they might not also understand your specific questions. And because of this, in most of the case, the researchers will prepare by himself, and then if it is the first one is just unstructured case. Unstructured case. This is unstructured case. That means you will simply prepare the questions and then ask by yourself. Whereas the structured case, questionnaire is just you will simply mail to the questionnaire, or you will actually send the questionnaire to the respondent, or you will left these questions on the office so that the respondent will actually fill on behalf of you. These are the different techniques for collecting data, but try to actually Google and then read about monkey online survey, online interview. There are specific electronics mechanisms, and then this will help you much, particularly for collecting data of these times for yourself. And try to also read this one. Let me also give some additional point related to maybe methods of data collections, particularly. In general, methods of data collections could be classified into three parts. The first part is personal interview. Second part is direct observations. Third part is self-administered questions. And then the personal interview, you will simply actually make an interview with selected individuals. And then these, the individuals might also actually, fill the response. And then the direct observation is also the case in which you might also collect the data. Self-administered question is also, I will actually elaborate one by one. A personal interview is just the case in which you will prepare the questions and record the respondent answer. And the primary advantage of this question is particularly when you actually, when people are just maybe face in person, and then you will most likely get an answer. That is the primary advantage, particularly. Compare, for instance, if you actually maybe drop your questionnaires on certain specific office, and then you will less likely get the proper respondent. And this is just the case in which you will directly ask the individuals to feed the questionnaires, and then this is, or you might simply also directly raise the questions to the peoples. And then the primary advantage of this case, personal interview in whatever case is just you will get an answer, particularly for the direct observation is a case in which the case in which data from different specific objective source could also be just collected by the researchers themselves. And the direct observation is the researcher will directly, mostly just applied for collecting data in maybe science discipline. This is because these direct observations might actually need to take data from certain laboratories. You will take data from laboratory, or you might also take data by some recording. And this kind of information might be referred as direct observations. And that means the researchers themselves will actually collect data. And then the third, which is the most widely used techniques for collecting data, particularly in business field, is self-administered questionnaire. Self-administered question that was actually primarily the researcher himself will actually prepare the question, and then he will actually deliver it or mailed to the respondent. And by whatever means, he might use, he might actually personally deliver, or he might also send by email. And then all this self-administered questionnaire is just actually the question will be, must be actually clear, and it will be replied by the respondent. That was the point. And then in order to collect data, particularly what kind of data collection instrument, particularly that the researcher is going to use in his studies. Basically, there are two most commonly used approach for collecting data. And these data are survey, and then primary undertaking survey is first. Second one is participatory rural appraisal technique is also the case. And these two are the most commonly used techniques for collecting data, primarily be it structured, be it unstructured, and almost it will help you much for collecting data. And I will actually also briefly explain the first, which is the methods, the major methods of survey administration. And then subsequently, I will also discuss certain issues related to this developing a very good questionnaire. How to design a very good questionnaire is also a part. The survey is the first most common means of gathering data informations. That was actually, it might be large scale national representative surveys might be available, which is meant for public, for undertaking analysis. Or you might also prepare questionnaire, and then you will also deploy by yourself survey. And then a good example of survey in Ethiopia, which is mostly available in different fields for researchers to undertake research, are the following. You will, for example, welfare monitoring survey. It is, the survey is available for each 5 specific, for 4 specific year interval. If you want, particularly, you want to actually work on this area, and you might simply access the data. The data is already just available in the World Bank website by Excel. And then these are almost the same households, almost replied an answer for successive for 4 years. And this type of data is referred as panel data. For instance, if you use the welfare monitoring survey, and then there is time series element from 1996, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016, and then to 2021. That means in each four year interval, you will have data. And then these data will have both a feature of cross-sectional as well as a feature of a time series. Demographic and health survey is also another, particularly if you want to work on health-related issues. You might also use these surveys data to supplement your specific primary data as well, and then try to also look the survey, which is already available, rural also survey, urban also survey. These are almost a survey which is compiled at national level. But this and then provided by the World Bank and then CSA just to provide informations. And then the primary objective of the survey is to assist policy-making decision effort of a government in different aspects. So that these surveys are available, you might use them, and then you might also undertake analysis, and then you might also provide an input for government. The survey might also be just developed by yourself, primarily by taking certain specific maybe sample, and this survey might also need a questionnaire. The primarily means for addressing the objective of survey will be actually, or the method of survey administration would be carried out through undertaking data collection through questionnaire. This questionnaire is pre-formulated written set of questions to which respondents record their answers, usually within, and then they actually, or it's also possible to say the questionnaire is just, it is written set of questions where the researcher want to exactly maybe raise his point, and then he expects the respondent to reply accordingly. And then the questionnaires are an efficient data collection mechanism when the researcher knows exactly what is required and how to measure the variable of interest. Particularly, he must actually address his own research questions through the questionnaire. If so, this questionnaire is an efficient data collection techniques. Two basic considerations should be applied while developing particularly good survey questions by yourself. First one is the question must be clear. The question must be ambitious, and then it must also provide all information related to your specific objectives. The question must also be allow accurate transmissions of respondent answer to the respondent. That means it must be clear, so that you must actually understand the all words that was actually raised or stated on the questions must also be just same, clearly translated by the respondent. More or less, while developing a questionnaire, the questionnaire could be good if you also consider the following specific criteria. A very good questionnaire might constitute, it must be actually complete, it must be concise, it must be reliable, valid, and then consistent. That means you need to be actually address the following specific 5 main elements in order to constitute a very good questionnaire. First one is very complete and concise. That means the good questionnaires particularly need to answer to obtain informations regarding to the survey, regarding to your research specific objectives, with few questions as possible. You need to actually raise certain few selected questions, but the questions must address your objectives. That was the point. The question must also address your specific objectives. As few questions as possible. That means while developing the questionnaire, you must actually prepare very few questions, but the questions must be actually directly targeting your specific objectives. A second specific case is the questionnaire is must also be just reliable. That means reliability is the first part, for which the software is also have a means to check reliability statistics by checking this alpha cron batch test result. And then this reliability, it means the same response must also be just obtained regardless of who asked the questions, where the question is at. That means if you actually have, let's say, five enumerators, and then each of these 5 enumerators must be actually each of these 5 enumerators must actually raise the same question, and then the respondent must also answer with the same understanding. That was the same response is just obtained regardless of who asked the questions, where the question is just asked. If you have 5 or 4 respondents, and then each of them must raise the same question for different respondent, and the same response must be obtained. This reliability must be just assured. And this reliability will be assured, particularly, you have to actually properly train the data collectors, particularly while collecting data, primary data, you need to properly provide the required training for all. And then the best way to assure reliability is just by providing adequate training for data collectors. The third is validity is also another. The good questionnaire must also be just valid, must provide valid data. That means you must also raise the question that ask very true and accurate response to measure your interests. That was actually, at the end of the day, we actually rely to answer your research questions, so maybe addressing the question. Therefore, whatever information which is already replied by the respondent must be true, and it must also be just accurate. That means you need to correctly ask and then correctly fill the information on the questionnaire. The last part is consistency. That the question must be translated in the same way that was actually raised by both the interviewers as well as the respondent. That means the interpretation between interviewer as well as the respondent must be the same. The same understanding must be met. And that is consistency. That means each of the respondent must also interpret the same meaning with the same way that the respondent understood. The same understanding must be maintained between respondent versus the across enumerators. It means the more or less some of main point related to developing a very good questionnaire are the following. The criteria for developing a very good questionnaires: does it provide the necessary decision-making information? That was the first part. That means at the end of the case, after developing the questionnaire, you need to actually judge, does it provide the required information to answer your specific objectives? If the questions, if all the question is that necessary to provide the required answer? Otherwise, you need to just revise and then discard some of the questions out of all. That is the case. And don't take unnecessary information out of your scope of the research. Does it consider the respondent ability? In some of the case, you might simply raise the questions by writing some specific technical terms. And then you have to avoid such technical words from the question. And then you also need to state the questions with clear language.
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ ኤምቢኤ በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ ኤምኤስሲ በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
That was the case. The other point is, how do we actually design a very good questionnaire is also another part. Specifically, while in order to develop a very good questionnaire, by just considering the above considerations, we also need to follow the following steps. And the first step is just, first, while developing the questionnaire, you have to start from your objective. And then you also need to consider the scope and limitations. The resource and constraint is also a part of the questionnaire. And then identify what data are just needed. Is it cross-sectional data? Is it time series data? Is it panel data? What type of data is needed for your research? And then, is it important to include questionnaire, particularly questionnaire on of all items that's directly related to your specific objectives on the question. That was also the case, in which, whatever the case, the first step is just, you need to maybe classify the questionnaire layout in line use specific objectives. Second specific objective is determine the data collection methods is also another. And the data collection methods might be also determined by yourself. Is it quite relevant to undertake face-to-face interview? Or, like for instance, in our case, rather than just going to face-to-face to collect data, we encourage students to collect data using internet and telephone, or through mail questionnaire, or through maybe monkey online survey, or through internet. And those specific mechanism is quite relevant, particularly for collecting data of this pandemic time. And then you also need to determine the type of data collections. Is it primary data is only suffixed to answer your specific objectives, or is it possible to also add some secondary data for some specific objectives? Is also the case. And while the third step is, while developing the questionnaire, you also need to identify the question formats. That was open-ended. We do have about 5 types of formats to raise questions in any field. And then that is possible to classify all questions into 5. First one is open-ended question, dichotomous question, scale response question, closed-ended questions, multiple choice questions. That means most of the case, if you raise your questions throughout, mostly if you raise the questions through open-ended questions, the problem is it is quite difficult to undertake analysis. It is quite difficult to change these to qualitative informations. Dichotomous response is questions that will have only 2 responses. Did you participate? Yes or no? Male, female, a kind of these questions might be referred as dichotomous response. Scale response questions, usually questions which will be answered through a Likert scale. Strongly agree, disagree, neutral, and then a kind of 5 question that was just raised through maybe scale response is also another. Closed-ended question is also a question that will have specific answer, specifically like for instance, marital status, and then of all the choice, an individual might select either married or single or maybe widowed. He will select definitely one. Multiple choice questions might involve an answer for multiple response format. Like for instance, which of the following problems did you actually encounter in your company? rent seeking, maybe embezzlement, different specific choice, and out of all choice, the individuals might opt all. That was multiple choice questions. That means you need to determine the compositions of the question format while developing your questionnaire. That was the third steps. The fourth step is decide the question wording is also another. The wording must be clear. It must also be just short. It must also be unbiased. You also need to don't ask maybe specific double barrel questions, leading question. That means you don't need to raise, maybe direct the individual to answer some specific directed questions. Consider the respondent ability to answer the questions in terms of language. All those highly detailed informations, unless otherwise you need the informations. Don't ask such specific detailed informations. Avoid personally embarrassing questions, touching questions, maybe annoying questions should not be raised. And the step 5 is establish the questionnaire flow and the layout. After preparing the questions, screen the questions, and then what is the relevance of each questions to your specific objectives. Begin with the questions that obtain respondent interest first, so that you raise subsequently another questions. Ask general questions first, like sex. Usually, the biographical information is just raised at the beginning. Then gradually you will go to the required specific questions. Put instructions in bold capital letters. Use proper introduction at the beginning, and then try to also acknowledge at the end. And then step 6 is evaluate the questionnaire and the layout. After even preparing the questions, and then all the questions are necessary. Particularly, the judgment must be made against your objectives. If the questionnaire is too long, in some of the cases, you need mostly it is just preferred to state questions in short, rather than just asking what is your sex, simply sex. What is your age in years? Age. Just very short, brief, so that it will be clear. Yes. With the questions, provide information needed to accomplish your specific objective is the first part. At the end of the day, you will use the information to address the questions. Therefore, all the information must also properly address research objectives. And then step 7 is the step 7 is actually related to approval of relevant parties. In this case, you might need to get approval from your advisor. Then subsequently, you will undertake pre-test and revising. You will pre-test will help you to make corrections, actually, and then to minimize the error related to maybe discrepancies between the question raised versus the respondent answer. And then you also correct, and then you will do the second pre-test. In some of the cases, we also advise to undertake certain pilot studies. This is because it will save time, money, and then you also have quite confident about the result at the end. And prepare final questionnaire copy is also another. Precise typing, instruction, spacing, numbering, pre-coding must also be just properly proofread. And then at the end, the last step is just you will implement the survey. The surveys might made through maybe enumerators, or it might also be made by yourself, and then you will actually undertake that one. That was the point. The other points for your consideration while designing survey questionnaire is the following. An excellent survey questionnaire will also need to process the following informations. First one is question ordering. Order is very important. You also need to raise certain general question, then gradually to specific one. You also need to raise certain specific questions that was towards to the interest of the respondent. Gradually, you will come to the your own specific target. Open question is also the case. Don't actually ask mostly open questions at the beginning. Open question is just mostly recommended, particularly to be raised as the end of your maybe closed and at the end of other specific questions. This is because it is quite difficult, particularly to undertake analysis. Open question might be because individuals might explain their ideas, and then changing that into quality information is quite difficult. The closed question is also the case in which, in this case, numerical answer properly give all specific choice, and then properly explain, and then the required code, all those is also requiring. Maybe so far, maybe the discussion is about data types, method of data collections, particularly survey. I will actually discuss the remaining parts subsequently, and then if you have questions, let me give you certain chance to make a discussion on it, on the previous part. Demiso. Yeah, Demiso, you may raise. Demiso, yeah.
Yes, doctor. Hello, doctor.
Yes, Simone, you can proceed.
Okay. Shall I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. We are talking about structured and unstructured question, I think.
Yeah.
Can you clear for me what structured question and unstructured questions, and also closed-ended and open-ended questionnaires? What are they?
Thank you very much. These are the different format for raising questions. A structured question is a questionnaire which is prepared by yourself, but will not be actually filled by yourself. You will simply prepare the question, and then you will send the questions either through messenger. You will, for instance, you have prepared the questionnaire, and then you just drop it certain specific office to be filled by the manager. This kind of question is structured question, and that means the respondent himself will read and understand and then fill on behalf of maybe to address the questions raised. This is structured, and this is structured. Unstructured question is totally different, which is you might simply prepare the questions, and then you yourself will actually raise the questions, whatever the required informations. It might be primary, it might be secondary, yes, to address the question. That was the point. Regarding to the closed and open-ended questions, open-ended question is just simply a questions which will be asked in people's individuals maybe ideas. For instance, let's say what type of problem did you face related to maybe marketing? What are the main problem faced related to marketing in this company? And then if you actually raise this kind of questions, which is open, an individual might make his point. He might simply briefly explain. That was open, yes? Closed is particularly, you will give an option, either in choice, either in different format. Closed is, it will have certain specifically choices. Like for instance, the closed-ended questions might be what is your education qualification, and then highest education qualification, degree. Maybe you have an option in terms of choice, and then if you raise what is your education qualification, highest education qualification, and the individual might raise one, like degree or second degree or third degree, yes, or PhD. He will actually pick one. This is closed. Open is something which raise individuals' ideas, and then individuals' people's maybe their judgment in terms of maybe will be asked by specific. It will ask individuals' views related to certain event. That is the missile. Yeah, is that okay? Is that okay? Okay.
Hello,
Let me
doctor.
also. Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Can I
yes.
come in, Mohammed?
Mohammed. Yeah, you can proceed.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank
You can.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying the various types of question format. One of the questionnaire format is not clear for me. I think it's dichotomy.
Dichotomy.
If I'm
okay.
not, yeah. If
yes.
that one is not clear for me, doctor.
Okay. Dichotomy.
What example? What kind of?
Dichotomy, an equation which will have only two options. For instance, sex, we have only two options, male, female. Response that have two answers. Did you participate on training? Yes or no. Only two specific answers. An equation that is just raised to have either 50-50 between the two responses stated as dichotomous equations. The best example is sex, male, female. Kind of this question. Is that clear?
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
And then this scale response format, that is a question which will be prepared by Likert scale measurement. I will actually elaborate this maybe in the next chapter. But most of the case, while preparing the questionnaire, you also need to prepare the questions in mostly by dichotomous questions, scale response questions, closed-ended questions, multiple choice questions. But the open-ended questions should be raised after exhausting the other part. That is the case. Let me also give additional chance. Just raise the point which is not clear to you. You can raise. No one? Is that clear? Shall we proceed? If you want to raise questions, or if you want to maybe add on the points that we discussed, welcome. We can do that. Let me also proceed to the remaining part. Particularly, apart from survey, the second methods for collecting data are participatory rural appraisal technique. Apart from survey, the second method for data collection is participatory rural appraisal technique. This technique is entirely borrowed from social science, and the method is particularly aiming to supplement the survey data. a participatory rural appraisal techniques will have two parts. The first part is focus group discussion. Second one is key informant interview. Primarily, this participatory rural appraisal technique is a method that was entirely borrowed from anthropology field, and then the researcher will actually going to collect the data through involving as active participant on certain specific communities, or he will actually particularly involved on the activities, and he will actually collect data. But this method might be actually quite difficult, particularly to apply for a business field. Rather, a type of these participatory rural appraisal techniques like focus group discussion and key informant interview is quite relevant. Focus group discussion is primarily, you will select certain individuals from the respondent, and these individuals specifically need to provide the required information, and then you will have certain specific focus group discussion guide, particularly an equation which will be developed based on inline your specific objectives, and then you will specifically raise questions, and then you will invite individuals. The focus group discussions might be as a maximum up to 20 individuals. Suppose you have 120 survey, and then from this 20 might be the maximum focus group discussions, let's say from different groups, and then you will simply raise certain questions for discussions, and then usually the peoples will make discussions on the idea, and then while conducting focus group discussions, you have to at least form two researchers. The first one is will facilitate maybe the discussion. Second one is he will actually take the note. While taking the note, you have to actually take the note what is already just agreed by whole, and that is a point. In the key informant interviews, you will simply select certain individuals, and then you will prepare certain key informant guide, particularly related to main specific objectives, and then you will ask. In most of the case, the key informant interview might be used to supplement the survey by secondary information. You will simply ask the individuals, selected individuals, main individuals, and then you will target to collect certain informations, certain secondary informations, and then you also need to give an opportunity for the individuals to make his point on your specific objectives, and so that the ultimate objective of both focus group discussions and the key informant interview, this will supplement the survey data. Just it will help you kind of some triangulation. Let me also give you additional chance, and then I will actually back to the last part. Is there anyone who want to actually? Do you have any specific question?
Can I ask, sir?
Yes. You can.
I am Seleshi.
Okay, Seleshi.
Yeah. In focus group discussion,
yeah,
there might be two researchers.
Yeah.
And the one will be jot down the points or agreements reached. Is it necessary to have an agreement on issues? It's a survey. Why do we need to have an agreement?
Yeah, that is a point. Actually, there are two participants. The first one is the one who will facilitate the discussion. He will raise a question, and then he will actually give a chance to the individuals. And while forming these group discussions, you have to also be wise. You don't need to include maybe non-disturbing individuals should be controlled. Otherwise, and people will not actually make their ideas. Like for instance, if you include both husband and wife on the same focus group discussions, in front of husband, wife will not actually explain certain issues that was actually embedded in our society. You see, that means for wife, husband might be disturbing, and she will not actually make her point. And because of this, the same, you shouldn't include the boss along with the employee. You have to actually the same group must be formed for focus group discussions, and you will particularly raise, like, let's say for instance, this is very open discussion. Like for instance, what are the main reason that leads a decline in sale during the last maybe consecutive months? And then this is a very serious question, and then the employee will not actually tells you the truth unless certain non-disturbing individuals is just controlled. If there is maybe a head, if in that specific group, if there is maybe marketing manager, and then no one is actually exposed him, yes, therefore the question will not be answered. And then if you have almost similar uniform group, and then individuals, they might make their point. And then at the end, your target must be what are the main reason that leads low sale in marketing, maybe sale in that specific marketing department. And then you need to judge the end result that's already just agreed by all. Otherwise, you will have an information which is not the case. That was the point, yes? And then
Thank you, sir.
Otherwise, this focus group discussion, in some of the case, it will give you additional specific informations, yes? Additional informations about that. Depth informations, depth issues will also be shared by the individuals. But the main point is, while forming this group discussion, you have to form with uniform group, bosses with both groups, and then maybe employees with another group, and you have to also assure the information should not be used for any other purpose, and that kind of information is very important. If you have these informations, and then particularly the point which is raised on focus group discussion is directly the question that is directly correspond to your core research problems, or the question that is directly correspond to your research specific questions. And then you need to note and then take what is already just agreed by all groups. In some of the cases, you also determine certain issues by vote. Yeah, you might need to actually count maybe this is because the question is just it will give give very information for your research to supplement survey informations. Nevertheless, you shouldn't overlook it. Maybe
Sir, clear.
Is that clear? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. One time while we are just conducting in this focus group discussions at one research in maybe out of Addis for maybe rural area, and then the topic is related to utilizations of agriculture technology among farmers, and then what are the constraints, opportunities, what are the factors not why farmers are not properly maybe adopt proper agriculture technology. That was the topic of the research. And then the researcher is just included development agent. The development agent is an agent who will actually assist farmers. And then no one is actually replying the response. What is the problems that leads you low maybe eye catcher technology utilization in this area? This is the question. And then the development agent is an agent. Is just responsible for distributing eye catcher technologies for farmers, so that the farmers will not actually will not expose his mistake as if and then because of this they didn't actually there is no problem related to distributions, and then what is already just found on focus group discussion versus what is already just found on survey is totally different in some of the cases. The problem is disturbing individuals are already included in the focus group discussion, and then if you fail to control those individuals, and then definitely it's quite difficult. That was the point. And then let me also add additional question if you have.
Doctor.
Yeah.
This is Mohammed. Thank you, Doctor.
Mohammed, okay.
Okay, just for not question, just like a suggestion, or like if we have some example of questionnaire from any field, it would help us if you can provide us any sample questionnaire.
Sample questions related to the distinction between the different types of questions.
Yeah, just any questionnaire developed for a research.
Yeah.
It will be a sample for us in the future, and it will help us a lot.
Okay. I will also try to share those specific questions just for your maybe for your consumption purpose. Any other point? And then
can I ask Doctor?
Okay.
This is Johannes.
Johannes, okay.
I was just I'm just wondering about not related to this one, but when we make a research, for example, scientific research or engineering research, which needs accurate solutions or improvements to some other materials or something, or some of them they don't have data, and some of them have data which are collected directly from laboratory tests. How does this research course in this business? I mean, I was. This is my first lesson about research, and then I was wondering how do we categorize this researches in this discussion?
Particularly, you might need to determine the type of data collection specifically. You will actually determine in the step 2, particularly the method of data collections. In your case, it might be actually need to collect data by personal observations, or you might also need to take data from a secondary data source. And then the type of data collection methods might be determined by in second steps. Like for instance, in different engineering field, we might actually need to take data by taking certain specific measurements. Taking measurement might be data collection mechanism. Yes, you need to determine the type of data collection methods that is particularly related to your specific objectives in research might be determined on these steps. And I don't know if it is clear. Maybe if it's not just clear, could you actually elaborate a bit more your question? Yeah? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. Actually, for those who have data collection from single source, for example, laboratory can process this one.
Yeah.
So research which doesn't involve data, but numerical or some calculations or something, which needs an exact improvement of to some engineering researches or something. I don't know how that was my, for the first one, we already answered data collection. Of course, we can take it directly from that. But for the others, which needs some specific engineering solutions, which has been done only in office just by individuals or scientists, I was wondering where it falls in this in which category that.
Yeah,
or is there another research?
In terms of research category, as you remember, in the first chapter, we classify research in different specific broad different categories. Some of research could be the classification could be using specifically field of specializations, particularly research which will be carried out by science discipline, and then it is almost research primarily it needs actual data. It might be actual data from field, or it might be actual data from laboratories, and then these are almost research would be carried out by science discipline. But our focus is research will be that is just primarily focusing by business socioeconomic fields, that was observing the socioeconomic situations of certain individuals or companies, and then synthesizing. That was the socioeconomic research. And almost the discussions that of this chapter is mainly made this particularly to this field, the research that is mostly applied for the social science, that's broad. And then within this field, we might also include the MBA program as well. That was the case. Okay, and just try to also just revise the first broad categories of research in terms of field. We have already just made in the first part. And almost the whole discussion is on socioeconomic field, socioeconomic field research. The last point is an assignment. I also just received most maybe topics and confirmed for your proposal topics, and then try to also supplement your specific maybe or maybe a proposal is just already one assignment that will be also accounted for about maybe 40%. I'm also just thinking to add certain point for your specific proposal. Try to also include the following point and then include as annex, and that will also be just taken as from 10%. That is related to particularly you need to consider the following points. And then try to actually provide very introduction. That was the first. The assignment is just develop survey questionnaire. You will simply prepare a survey questionnaire, about 2 or maybe 3 or 4 pages for your specific objectives. By simply reading this chapter, and then you will develop the questionnaire, and then you will attach as annex. It will be evaluated from 10%. And then while developing the questionnaire, you also need to while developing the questionnaire, you need to pay attention to the following point. You have to provide introduction, short at the beginning of first page, and then you must be actually providing, explaining the research specific objectives, and then you have to also mention the neutrality of the research, and all those specific points might be actually stated in one paragraph. And then you have to also include.
Hello, doctor. Hello, doctor.
Yeah.
Hello, doctor.
Yes.
There is a disturbing sound. We cannot hear you properly, doctor. I don't know where it comes from. There is a disturbing sound.
At the back, yeah?
Now,
Yeah, problem is some students are not muting. Let me do that. Now it's okay.
There is a disturbing sound.
It, okay, mute all. This one is that mute? Now it's okay?
Not yet, doctor. Not yet.
Not yet, yeah? Try to actually make this mute for some of individuals. They actually fail to do so, like Brahan.
Hello, doctor. Could you please unmute yourself?
Now it's okay? And develop the draft data collection plan that was actually to be included in research methodology part. You also need to include what type of data, and then how do you actually plan to collect the data, and for the proposed topics should also be just included, must also be included as a part of research methodology part, and then the survey questionnaire should also be just attached at the end as annex of the proposal. And this will also account about 10% of evaluations. That means almost most of the evaluation part so far is, it accounts about 50%. And I will also thinking to add 20% on the remaining chapters. And mostly we will actually working and then evaluating the course on the continuous basis. That was on continuous assessment basis. Yes, is that clear? This one? Is that maybe the point is clear?
Okay, doctor, is this part of that the proposal is already given assignment or another?
Yeah. Now, in that part, there is research methodology part. The research methodology part should explain the data type, data method of data collections, techniques, must also be briefly explained. Yes, at least by maybe a half paragraph or more. Should that specific data collection plan must also be a part of a proposal. Plus, you also need to prepare the questionnaire specifically for your proposed proposal, and you will include as annex. And that annex must also be will account about 10%. The questionnaire, that will survey questionnaire for your proposal. You will develop the survey questionnaire for your proposal, and then you will actually attach as annex. And then I will actually cross-check against your objectives versus maybe the questionnaire specific criteria. Try to actually read the criteria of developing this good questionnaire, these steps, and then try to develop by yourself the survey questionnaire. That was the assignment. Yes, it will be accounting about 10%. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you.
And while actually developing the survey questionnaire, try to also consider the following pointers. Yes, you will actually develop the questionnaire by reading these chapters. Yes, nothing more. Yes, you will need to properly read, understand, and then try to actually by yourself practice. And this will account about 10% of additionally 10% from 40. That was so far. Proposal plus survey questionnaire development will account about 50% of the evaluation. That was the point, yes? And then you will submit together with proposal. And then if you have, I also just received certain specific maybe suggestions, the power interruptions, and then maybe noise of these rainy days, and then all inconveniences, and then we actually managed the class today. And then keep on reading the PowerPoints, and then if you have questions, try to raise your questions either by email or maybe by phone. I will also just elaborate the issues, yes? Do you have any additional pointers? Shall I give you any additional chance? Do you want to raise? Do you want to raise?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. You can proceed, yeah. Proceed.
Hello, doctor.
You can proceed.
Okay. For the last class,
yeah,
because of the network connection, I was not attending the class.
Okay. Which class? Or today's class?
In the third chapter. No, for the last class.
Third chapter. Okay.
No,
okay.
For the about data collection methods. Last class, last Monday.
Okay. You want to actually raise pointers on that specific class?
Yeah, I have one question for that class, I think.
Okay.
I think in data collection methods, our data must be either explanatory or descriptive, I think.
Okay.
I was not attend that class because of network connection. So can you explain this explanatory and descriptive data collection or data techniques methods? I think
descriptive says
ልዩነት መፍጠር ዓላማችን ነው። ዓለም አቀፍ ተወዳዳሪ መሆን አለባችሁ። የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ጥራትና ደረጃውን የጠበቀ ስልጠና በመስጠት ብቁ ዜጋ እያፈራን ነው። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ፣ በቲኬቲንግና ሪዘርቬሽን፣ በሆቴልና ቱሪዝም ሙያዎች አሰልጥነን ተወዳዳሪ እናደርጉታለን። ኮሌጃችን ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ICM ጋር በመተባበር ዓለም አቀፍ ዕውቅና ያለው ስልጠና እየሰጠ ይገኛል። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን በበረራ መስተንግዶ የምንሰጣቸው ስልጠና ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና አለው። አድራሻ ከጎላጉል ታወር 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።